The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep rumbling sound. Ambassador Kethvar walked slowly into the huge room, his blue-scaled hands shaking as he carried a datapad filled with terrible images. Behind him, 3 other members of his species followed, their heads down and their eyes full of fear. The chamber was enormous, bigger than any building on Earth. Hundreds of different alien species sat in curved rows that went up to the high ceiling. Some looked like giant insects with many arms. Others were made of living crystal that sparkled in the light. Some were clouds of gas held together by energy fields. And some looked almost human, but with strange skin colors and extra eyes. Kethavar's people, the Zilani, looked the most like humans. They had blue skin and scales instead of hair, but they walked on 2 legs and had 2 arms just like people from Earth. Right now, Kethavar looked like he had not slept in many days. His clothes were wrinkled and dirty, as if he had traveled a very long way without stopping. The council speaker, a tall being made of living metal, raised one hand. The council will hear the emergency petition from the Zilani Republic, the speaker said in a voice that sounded like bells ringing. Kethavar stepped forward and activated his datapad. Above the center of the chamber, huge pictures appeared in the air. They showed worlds burning, cities turned to ash, ships destroyed and floating dead in space. The images were so terrible that several council members looked away. Honored council members, Kethavar began, his voice breaking with emotion. I come before you with the worst news possible. The Vorthon Empire has begun what they call the Great Cleansing. They are not just conquering worlds anymore. They are destroying every form of life they find and rebuilding everything to match their own image. He pressed another button on his datapad. New images appeared. These showed before and after pictures of planets. The before pictures showed green worlds with cities and forests and oceans. The after pictures showed gray, dead rocks, with strange metal buildings that all looked exactly the same. 17 worlds have already fallen completely, Kethavar continued. The Vorthons land on a planet and kill everything that lives there, every person, every animal, every plant. Then they bring in machines that change the very air and water to match their home world. Finally, they build their cities and move in their own people. The chamber was completely silent. Many of the council members had never seen such complete destruction before. Even the warrior species looked shocked and afraid. They move like a sickness across our part of the galaxy, Kethavar said, tears running down his scaled cheeks. We have tried to fight them, but our ships and soldiers are no match for their military. They have weapons we cannot defend against. They have ships that are larger and faster than ours. Most importantly, they have no mercy at all. He showed more images. These were of Vorthon soldiers. They were tall and thin, with gray skin and no hair at all. Their eyes were completely black, and they wore armor that covered their entire bodies. The pictures showed them walking through destroyed cities, stepping over the bodies of dead civilians without even looking down. The Vorthons do not take prisoners, Kethavar explained. They do not want to rule over other species. They want to replace all other species with their own kind. They believe that only they deserve to live in the galaxy. An alien that looked like a giant purple octopus raised several of its arms. Ambassador Kethavar, it said in a gurgling voice. What exactly are you asking the council to do about this situation? Kethavar took a deep breath. I am asking for help. I am begging for help. The Zilani Republic has only 4 worlds left, and the Vorthons are already attacking 2 of them. Without assistance from the other species, my people will be extinct within 1 year. The council chamber erupted in noise as hundreds of different species began talking at once. Some were clicking, some were buzzing, some were making sounds, like music, and some were speaking in languages that sounded almost human. The metal council speaker raised both hands for quiet. The council will hear responses from member species, he announced. The first to speak was Ambassador Velnara of the Aquarian Federation. She was tall and thin with blue-green skin and gills on her neck. Her people lived mostly underwater on ocean worlds. The Aquarian Federation sympathizes with the terrible situation facing the Zilani people, she said in a voice like water flowing over rocks. However, our fleets are already stretched thin, protecting our own borders from Vorthon expansion. We have 47 worlds to defend, and we cannot spare ships for offensive operations. We must think of our own people first. Next came war leader Kraxoth of the Drakmari hegemony. His people looked like giant lizards with spikes all over their bodies. They were known as fierce warriors who loved to fight. The Drakmari respect the Zilani as honorable beings. Kraxoth growled in a voice like rocks grinding together. But this is not our fight. The Vorthons have not attacked Drakmari space. We see no reason to start a war with them when we could avoid it by staying in our own territory. Let them have their expansion. The galaxy is big enough for everyone. One by one, each major species gave the same type of answer. The Christarchs said their ships moved too slowly to help in time. The Nebulites claimed their technology would not work in solid matter combat. The Insectoids said they were too busy with their own internal politics. Each excuse made Kethvar look more desperate and afraid. His fellow Zilani began to cry openly, knowing that their people were doomed. Some council members looked uncomfortable, but none of them changed their minds about helping. Finally, when it seemed like every major species had refused to help, a new voice spoke up from the back corner of the chamber. The United Earth Defense Force volunteers to assist the Zilani people. Everyone turned to look at the source of the voice. In a small section that most council members usually ignored sat three beings that looked almost exactly like Kethvar's people, except they had different colored skin and hair instead of scales. The one who had spoken was a middle-aged man with gray hair and kind eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform with small metal decorations on the chest. This was Ambassador Paul Carter, the chief representative of Earth to the Galactic Council. Next, to him sat a woman with short brown hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Her uniform was dark blue with more metal decorations showing she was military. This was Admiral Lisa Morgan, the commander of Earth's space fleet. The third human was a woman with long red hair tied back in a simple style. She wore a white coat over her uniform, marking her as a scientist and doctor. This was Dr. Kate Sullivan, Earth's chief medical officer for alien relations. The chamber fell completely silent. Several council members turned to stare at the humans with looks of complete shock. Others seemed to think the humans were making a joke. Ambassador Velnara of the Aquarians was the first to recover from her surprise. "You cannot possibly be serious," she said, her voice full of disbelief. "Humans have barely left their single star system. Your species only joined the Council 5 years ago. You know nothing about galactic warfare or the true power of the Vorthon Empire." Other council members began to speak up, their voices full of the same disbelief. "Humans have never fought a space battle larger than a few dozen ships," said war leader Kraxoth. "The Vorthons bring fleets of thousands." "Human weapons technology is centuries behind Vorthon equipment," added a Christarch representative, its crystal body flashing different colors as it spoke. "Human soldiers have only fought other humans," said an insectoid delegate. "They have never faced the advanced combat systems of a truly militaristic species." Through all of these comments, Paul Carter stood calmly and waited. When the voices died down, he looked directly at Kethvar, ignoring all the other council members. "Ambassador Kethvar," Paul said in a clear, steady voice, "Earth may be new to galactic politics, but we are not new to standing up to bullies who pick on people weaker than themselves. We know what it feels like when no one else will help someone who desperately needs it." He paused and looked around the chamber at all the different species who had refused to help. "We also know what it means to fight when the odds are against us," Paul continued. "Human history is full of times when we had to fight enemies who were bigger, stronger, and better equipped than we were. Sometimes we lost those fights. But we never stopped trying, and we never abandoned people who needed our help." Kethvar stared at the human ambassador with hope beginning to show in his eyes for the first time since entering the chamber. "Are you truly offering to send your military to help defend Zilani worlds?" Kethvar asked, his voice shaking with emotion. Admiral Lisa Morgan stood up next to Paul Carter. Her voice was firm and confident as she spoke. "The Earth Defense Force will deploy immediately to assist in the defense of Zilani space," she said. "We may not have the largest ships or the most advanced weapons, but we have something that seems to be rare in this galaxy right now. We have the will to fight for what is right, even when it is difficult and dangerous." Dr. Kate Sullivan also stood. "Earth's Medical Corps will provide humanitarian assistance to Zilani civilians and refugees. she added. No one should have to face this kind of threat alone. Admiral Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of the UES Defender and watched the stars slowly change as her fleet moved through space. The ship was the newest and largest vessel in the Earth Defense Force, but compared to the alien ships she had seen at the Galactic Council, it looked small and simple. Around the Defender, 29 other Earth ships traveled in perfect formation. There were destroyers and cruisers, supply ships and medical vessels, and several ships carrying ground troops and their equipment. This was the largest fleet humanity had ever sent beyond their own solar system. The journey to Zilani space took 3 weeks. During that time, Lisa's ships passed many alien vessels traveling in the opposite direction. Most of them were clearly running away from something. Their hulls showed damage from weapons, and some were barely holding together. A few tried to signal the human fleet, but their messages all said the same thing. Turn back, the Vorthons cannot be stopped. Lisa ignored all of these warnings. She had made a promise to help the Zilani people, and she intended to keep that promise no matter what they might face. Admiral, said Communications Officer Jake Peterson from his station near the front of the bridge. He was a young man with short blonde hair who had joined the Space Force only 2 years earlier. We are receiving a distress signal from the Zilani colony world of New Thessia. The transmission is very weak, but it sounds like the Vorthons have begun their attack. Lisa walked over to Jake's station and listened to the crackling radio message. Through the static, she could hear voices speaking in the Zilani language. Even though she did not understand the words, she could hear the fear and desperation in those voices. Can you clean up the signal enough for our translation computers to work? She asked. Jake worked at his controls for several minutes. Slowly, the alien voices became clearer, and the computer began translating their words into English. This is New Thessia Emergency Command, the voice said. Vorthon fleet has entered our system. They are bombing our cities and attacking our evacuation ships. We have maybe 6 hours before our shields fail completely. Any ships in the area, please help us. Please do not let our children die here. Lisa felt a cold anger growing in her chest. She had heard reports about Vorthon attacks, but hearing the actual voices of people who were about to die made it real in a way that no report could. She pressed a button that opened communication channels to all ships in her fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Morgan, she said in a clear, steady voice. We are about to drop out of hyperspace at New Thessia. Intelligence reports suggest we will be facing a Vorthon fleet that outnumbers us at least 3 to 1. Their ships are larger and more heavily armed than ours. She paused for a moment, knowing that her next words would be heard by thousands of human soldiers and spacers. But remember why we are here. We came because someone asked for help and no one else would give it. We came because innocent people were going to die if we did nothing. The size of the enemy fleet does not change that. Our mission remains the same. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. The responses from her ship captains came back immediately, and they were all the same. Understood, Admiral. Ready to engage? Lisa smiled grimly. This was why she was proud to be human. When faced with impossible odds, her people did not run away or make excuses. They simply asked what needed to be done and then did it. All ships, prepare for combat drop in 30 seconds, she announced. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Thessia system, and immediately everyone on every ship could see that the situation was even worse than they had expected. The planet hung in space like a wounded animal, its surface covered with fires and smoke. Around it, massive Vorthon warships moved slowly, taking their time to destroy everything they could find. The Vorthon ships were huge, each one at least twice the size of the Defender. Their hulls were dark gray and covered with weapon systems that glowed red in the darkness of space. There were 12 of the giant ships, plus dozens of smaller fighters and attack vessels. Between the Vorthon fleet and the planet, small Zilani ships were trying desperately to escape. Most of them were civilian vessels loaded with refugees. As Lisa watched, one of the refugee ships exploded under fire from Vorthon fighters. Hundreds of innocent people died in that single flash of light. All ships engage the enemy immediately, Lisa ordered. Priority targets are any Vorthon vessels attacking civilian ships. Show these bullies what happens when they pick on the defenseless. The human fleet spread out and began their attack. The Vorthons seemed surprised to see new ships arriving, especially ships they did not recognize. Their response was slow and confused at first. That confusion did not last long. Within minutes, the Vorthon commanders had identified the human ships as enemies and began targeting them with their massive weapons. Beams of red energy and explosive missiles filled the space between the two fleets. Captain Steve Harrison commanded the UES Gladiator, one of the smaller human ships. His vessel took heavy damage in the first exchange of fire, with hull breaches on 3 decks and his main engines failing. According to all military doctrine, he should have retreated to a safe distance for repairs. Instead, Captain Harrison did something that shocked both his own crew and the Vorthon commanders watching the battle. He ordered his ship to accelerate directly toward the largest Vorthon vessel, a massive command ship that was directing the attack on the refugee fleet. "Captain," said his first officer, a woman named Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster, "if we continue on this course, we will collide with their ship." "We will all be killed. Not all of us," Steve replied calmly. He activated the ship's emergency communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We are going to ram the enemy command ship. All crew members have 60 seconds to get to the escape pods. This is not a request, it is an order." The crew of the Gladiator moved with the speed and efficiency that came from months of training. In less than 1 minute, every human on the ship except Captain Harrison was sealed inside an escape pod. Steve programmed the ship's computer to continue the attack run, then ejected in his own pod at the last possible second. The UES Gladiator, now guided only by its artificial intelligence, slammed into the side of the Vorthon command ship at full speed. The explosion was visible from every other ship in the battle. When the light faded, both vessels were gone. The Vorthon fleet suddenly found itself without central coordination. Their remaining ships began making mistakes, firing at each other by accident, and moving into positions where the smaller human ships could attack them more effectively. On the surface of New Thessia, Marine Colonel Ryan Brooks was leading a different kind of battle. His soldiers had landed in the middle of the largest Zelani city, just as Vorthon ground troops were beginning their assault on civilian shelters. The Zelani people were not fighters. They were farmers and teachers, doctors and artists. They had no weapons and no training in combat. When the Vorthons began their attack, the only thing the Zelani could do was run and hide. Colonel Brooks had brought 2,000 human Marines to the planet, but they faced at least 10,000 Vorthon soldiers. The enemy troops were better equipped and had been fighting wars for decades. They expected the humans to retreat or surrender quickly. They were completely wrong about what humans would do when protecting innocent people. Staff. Sergeant Maria Santos found herself defending a school where 300 Zelani children were hiding in the basement. The building was surrounded by Vorthon soldiers who were preparing to break down the doors and kill everyone inside. Maria had only 12 Marines with her, and they were running low on ammunition. The smart tactical choice would have been to fall back to a better defensive position and call for reinforcements. Instead, Maria decided to attack. She led her small team in a charge directly at the Vorthon positions. The enemy soldiers, who outnumbered the humans 5-1, were so surprised by this aggressive move that they fell back in confusion. While the Vorthons were distracted by the human attack, the Zelani children were able to escape through a back entrance and reach the evacuation shuttles that were waiting to take them to safety. Maria's attack cost her team heavily. She was wounded in 2 places, and half of her Marines were injured, but every single Zelani child in that school survived. Similar scenes played out all across the planet. Human soldiers who were outnumbered and outgunned somehow found ways to protect Zelani civilians. They used tactics that the Vorthons had never seen before. Tactics that seemed crazy but somehow worked. Private Danny Walsh was positioned on a rooftop with a sniper rifle, providing cover for evacuating civilians. He had been awake and fighting for 18 hours straight, and his position was being attacked by at least 50 Vorthon soldiers. "Colonel," he radioed to Ryan Brooks, "I count enemy troops moving on the main refugee camp. They will be there in 10 minutes, and there are too many for our defensive positions to stop." "Copy that, Walsh," came the reply. "All units prepare for final defensive positions. Remember, we did not come this far to let these people down now." The human Marines took their positions around the refugee camp, knowing that they were probably going to die in the next few minutes. There were thousands of Zelani civilians behind them. On the water world of Aquarian Prime, Fleet Commander Seshital stood in his command center watching battle footage from New Thessia. The blue-skinned leader of the Aquarian military had seen many space battles in his long career. but nothing like what the humans were doing. "This cannot be real," he said to his tactical officer, a younger Aquarian named Velkara. "Show me the numbers again." Velkara activated the holographic display and columns of data appeared in the water-filled air around them. "Sir, the human fleet consists of 30 ships. The Vorthon force attacking New Thessia has 47 ships, each one larger and more heavily armed than the human vessels." Seshtal studied the tactical data with growing amazement. By every rule of space warfare that he knew, the humans should have been destroyed within the first hour of battle. Instead, they had not only survived but were actually winning. "How are they doing this?" he asked, watching video footage of human ships performing maneuvers that seemed impossible. "Their technology is less advanced than ours, their ships are smaller, and they are badly outnumbered." Velkara highlighted different sections of the battle footage. "Sir, it appears they are using tactics we have never seen before. Look at how they coordinate their movements. Each ship operates independently, but they all work together as if they share the same mind." The footage showed human vessels moving in perfect formation, covering each other's weak points and concentrating their fire on enemy targets with precision timing. When one human ship was damaged, 2 others immediately moved to protect it while a third took over its tactical role. "And their soldiers," Velkara continued, switching to ground battle footage. "They keep fighting even when they are severely wounded. Watch this." The screen showed human Marines charging a Vorthon position that had at least 5 times as many defenders. The humans were clearly outgunned and outnumbered, but they kept advancing even when their comrades fell around them. Most shocking of all, they carried their wounded to safety while still fighting the enemy. Seshtal had commanded Aquarian forces for 30 years, and he had never seen anything like this. "Their casualties must be enormous," he said. "Actually, sir, that is the strangest part," Velkara replied. "Their casualty rates are lower than ours would be in the same situation. They seem to protect each other better than we protect ourselves." Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy as other species watched the battle footage from New Thessia. On the warrior world of Drakmari Prime, War Chief Thexmor was reviewing the same videos with his military council. The Drakmari were known throughout the galaxy as fierce fighters who loved battle and respected strength above all else. They had refused to help the Zalani because they saw no honor in fighting someone else's war. Now they watched in shock as the humans demonstrated a type of courage they had never imagined. "Look at this human female," Thexmor said, pointing to footage of Staff Sergeant Maria Santos defending the school full of Zalani children. "She leads 12 warriors against 60 Vorthon soldiers. Any rational commander would retreat and call for reinforcements." The footage showed Maria's desperate charge against the overwhelming enemy force. Her small team should have been wiped out in seconds, but somehow they managed to drive back the larger Vorthon unit through sheer determination and tactical skill. "She fights not for glory or conquest," observed War Captain Krextal, one of Thexmor's advisors. "She fights to protect younglings that are not even her own species. Where is the honor in that?" Thexmor was quiet for a long moment, studying the images of human soldiers risking their lives for alien civilians. "Perhaps we have misunderstood what honor means," he said finally. "Perhaps there is greater honor in protecting the innocent than in defeating the strong." On the crystal world of Shardhome, the Christarch Collective was analyzing the human tactics with their advanced computational abilities. The crystal beings were known for their logic and precision, but the human approach to warfare seemed to defy all logical analysis. Fleet Singer, Resonance of Honor, the closest thing the Christarchs had to a military leader, reviewed the tactical data with growing confusion. "Their strategy makes no sense according to our models," she communicated to the other Christarchs through harmonic vibrations. "They make decisions based on emotional factors rather than pure logic, yet they are winning," observed War Hymn Crystal Edge. "Their emotional decision-making somehow produces better results than our logical calculations." The Christarchs watched footage of Captain Steve Harrison deliberately crashing his ship into the Vorthon command vessel. By all logical analysis, this was a wasteful suicide that accomplished nothing except the destruction of a valuable ship and crew. But the tactical results told a different story. The loss of their command ship had thrown the entire Vorthon fleet into confusion, allowing the smaller human force to gain a decisive advantage. One human's willingness to sacrifice himself had saved thousands of lives. Perhaps logic alone is not sufficient for understanding warfare. Resonance of Honor admitted. Perhaps there is something to be learned from human emotional thinking. On Earth, President Helen Murphy stood before the cameras in the White House press room. Behind her, a large screen showed real-time updates from the battle at New Thessia. The entire planet was watching as their small fleet fought desperately to protect an alien species most humans had never heard of before. "My fellow humans," President Murphy began, her voice steady despite the terrible images playing behind her. "Right now, our sons and daughters are fighting in a distant star system against an enemy that outnumbers them and outguns them. They are fighting for people they have never met, to protect children who do not even look like our children." She paused, looking directly into the camera. They did not ask for this fight. No one forced them to go. When the galaxy turned its back on innocent people who were about to die, our military volunteers stepped forward and said, "We will help." The footage behind her showed human medics treating wounded Zilani civilians while bombs exploded around them. It showed human engineers working around the clock to repair damaged evacuation ships. It showed human soldiers sharing their food and water with alien refugees. "This is who we are," President Murphy continued. "This is what we do. When someone calls for help and no one else will answer, we answer. When innocent people are in danger and no one else will protect them, we protect them. This is not because we are stronger or smarter than other species. It is because we believe that doing the right thing is more important than doing the safe thing." The response from Earth was immediate and overwhelming. Recruitment offices for the space military were flooded with volunteers wanting to join the fight. Civilians organized relief efforts to send supplies to the Zilani refugees. Children in schools held fundraisers to help rebuild destroyed Zilani cities they had never seen. Meanwhile, in Vorthon space, War Master Gextar was receiving reports of the human intervention with growing fury. The supreme commander of the Vorthon military stood in his command chamber aboard the largest warship ever built, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Empire's vast fleets. "These Deathworlders dare to interfere with our expansion?" He snarled to his subordinates. "They think their primitive technology and emotional weakness can stand against the might of the Vorthon Empire." His tactical advisor, Subcommander Velgex, displayed the latest battle reports. "War Master, the humans have successfully defended New Thessia and are now moving to protect other Zilani worlds. Our forces are reporting unexpectedly heavy resistance." Gextar's black eyes narrowed with rage. "Send the Fifth Fleet immediately. I want these humans crushed so completely that their destruction will serve as a warning to any other species that might consider defying us." But as the Vorthon reinforcements moved toward Zilani space, something unexpected began happening across the galaxy. The news of humanity's stand had spread to every civilized world, and the reaction was not what anyone had expected. On Christarch Prime, Fleet Singer Resonance of Honor made an announcement that shocked her entire species. "The collective has decided to send 3 of our defender ships to assist the human fleet. We have calculated that their cause is logically justified, and their tactical methods deserve study. It was the first time in Christarch history that they had volunteered to help in someone else's war." Similar announcements came from other worlds. The Nebulites, who had claimed their technology was incompatible with solid matter warfare, suddenly discovered ways to adapt their ships for combat support. 5 of their cloud ships departed for Zilani space within hours. Most surprising of all was the response from the Drakmari hegemony. War Chief Thexmore personally led a squadron of their best warships toward the battle zone. When asked why he had changed his mind about helping, his response became famous across the galaxy. "The humans have shown us what true warriors look like," he said. "They fight not for conquest or glory, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves. There is honor in such a fight, and the Drakmari will not be found lacking in honor." Admiral Lisa Morgan was coordinating the defense of the Zilani system when her communications officer reported multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of their sensor range. The combined fleet now stretched across 3 star systems, with ships from 15 different alien species working together under human coordination. Admiral Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of the UES Defender and looked at the tactical display showing the massive armada that had formed around her small human fleet. 3 months had passed since the first battle at New Thessia. In that time, more and more alien species had arrived to join the fight against the Vorthons. The Christarchs had sent their largest ships, vessels made of living crystal that could absorb energy weapons and redirect them back at enemies. The Nebulites had brought their cloud ships which could change shape and pass through solid matter. Even the proud Drakmari had sent their best warriors. But despite all these powerful allies, the humans remained at the center of everything. The alien species had quickly learned that humans had something special when it came to fighting impossible battles. They never gave up, no matter how bad things looked. Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres was flying his fighter through a field of enemy fire, his ship badly damaged, and his life support systems failing. Warning lights flashed red all over his cockpit, and he could taste blood in his mouth from internal injuries. His Drakmari wingman, a warrior named Krexval, was flying beside him. "Human pilot," Krexval said over the radio, his voice filled with concern. "Your ship is dying. You must retreat to the medical ships immediately." Ben looked at his instruments and saw that Krexval was right. His fighter had maybe 10 minutes of air left. His weapons were almost out of ammunition, and his engines were running on emergency power. Any reasonable pilot would head back to the fleet for repairs, but below them, a Vorthon assault force was attacking a refugee convoy trying to escape from the planet Zelani Prime. Hundreds of civilian ships were under fire from enemy fighters, and people were dying with every passing second. "Negative, Krexval," Ben replied, turning his damaged fighter toward the enemy formation. "Those people down there need help right now. Retreat is not in our vocabulary when innocent lives are at stake." Ben dove his failing fighter into the middle of the Vorthon attack formation. His weapons were nearly empty, but he used every shot to draw enemy fire away from the refugee ships. When his guns finally ran out of ammunition, he began ramming enemy fighters with his own ship, using it as a weapon even as it fell apart around him. Krexval watched in amazement as the human pilot continued fighting, even when his ship was clearly beyond saving. This was not the first time the Drakmari warrior had seen humans do impossible things, but it still surprised him every time. "All Drakmari fighters," Krexval announced on his squadron frequency, "follow the human lead. If he can fight with a dying ship, we can fight with healthy ones. Attack formation, protect the refugees." The Drakmari squadron charged into battle with renewed energy, inspired by Ben's example. Similar scenes were happening all across the combined fleet as alien warriors learned from human determination. On the ground, the mixed species forces were seeing human stubbornness firsthand. Sergeant Nicole Wright had been fighting for 6 days straight with only a few hours of sleep. She had been wounded in 3 different battles with bandages covering cuts on her arms and a limp from a leg injury. Most soldiers would have been sent to the medical station days ago, but Nicole was not most soldiers. She was a human marine, and there were still civilians who needed protection. Right now, she was carrying a wounded Zelani child through a bombed-out city while directing artillery strikes against enemy positions using her radio. "Sergeant Wright," said an Aquarian soldier who was fighting alongside her, "you need medical attention. Your wounds are serious, and you have been fighting without rest for too long." Nicole shifted the injured child to a more comfortable position and continued walking toward the evacuation point. "I will rest when this little one is safe," she said simply. "Until then, I have work to do." The Aquarian soldier had never seen anything like human determination before. His own people were brave fighters, but they knew when to retreat and recover. Humans seemed to have no concept of giving up when someone needed their help. "How do you keep going?" the Aquarian asked. "How do you fight when your body is telling you to stop?" Nicole looked down at the Zelani child in her arms. The little girl was maybe 6 years old, with bright blue scales and large eyes that looked up at Nicole with complete trust. "Because she needs me to," Nicole answered. "Because if I stop fighting, who will protect her?" The Aquarian soldier understood then why so many species had joined the human cause. It was not just about defeating the Vorthons. It was about learning to be the kind of people who would never abandon someone who needed help. Meanwhile, in space, the largest battle of the war was about to begin. Long-range sensors had detected a massive Vorthon fleet approaching the Zelani system. This was not just another attack force. This was the personal fleet of War Master Gextar himself, the supreme commander of all Vorthon military forces. The approaching fleet contained over 200 ships, including the largest warships the Vorthon Empire had ever built. Each of the command vessels was bigger than 3 human ships put together, armed with weapons that could destroy entire cities with a single shot. Captain Alex, Foster of the UES Retribution, was preparing to lead a boarding party against one of the smaller Vorthon ships when the enemy reinforcements were detected. His team consisted of 12 human marines and 20 alien volunteers from different species. "Captain," said his communications officer, "Fleet Command is reporting that the enemy reinforcements outnumber our entire combined fleet by at least 2 to 1. Admiral Morgan is asking all ships to prepare for possible retreat." Alex looked at his mixed team of humans and aliens. They had been fighting together for weeks now, and he had seen what they could accomplish when they worked as one unit. "Did Admiral Morgan order us to retreat?" he asked. "No, sir," the communications officer replied. "She said prepare for possible retreat, not that we were actually retreating." Alex smiled. He knew Lisa Morgan well enough to understand what she really meant. She was giving every ship the option to leave if they wanted to, but she was not ordering anyone to run away. "All teams, this is Captain Foster," he announced on the boarding party frequency. "We have a choice to make. A very large enemy fleet is coming our way, and things are about to get much more dangerous than they already are. Anyone who wants to head back to the transport ships can do so now, and no one will think less of them for it." He paused and looked around at his team. Not a single person moved toward the exit. "In that case," Alex continued, "let's go show these Vorthons what happens when they threaten innocent people. Remember, we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for everyone who cannot fight back." The boarding party launched toward their target, a Vorthon cruiser that was bombarding civilian settlements on the planet below. The small human assault shuttle looked tiny compared to the enemy warship, like a mouse attacking a lion. But size had never stopped humans before, and it was not going to stop them now. The battle reached its most critical point when War Master Gextar himself arrived with his massive fleet. The alien ships in the combined force began to waver as they saw the enormous Vorthon armada approaching. Even the brave Drakmari warriors looked uncertain when faced with such overwhelming numbers. Admiral Lisa Morgan opened a communication channel to every ship in the combined fleet. Her voice was calm and steady as she spoke, showing no fear despite the impossible odds they were facing. "All ships, this is Admiral Morgan," she said. "I know that fleet looks scary. I know we are outnumbered by a very large margin. I know that any reasonable military force would retreat in the face of such overwhelming enemy strength." She paused for a moment, looking out at the stars where her small fleet was about to face the largest military force in Vorthon history. "But we did not come here to be reasonable," she continued. "We came here to protect people who could not protect themselves. That mission has not changed, no matter how many enemy ships are coming our way. We will hold this line because it is the right thing to do, and because no one else will do it if we do not." The response from the combined fleet was immediate and overwhelming. Ship after ship reported ready for battle. Species that had never worked together before began coordinating their attacks according to human tactical principles. The Christarchs moved into defensive positions while the Nebulites prepared to jam enemy communications. The Drakmari and Aquarians formed attack formations alongside human vessels. "Admiral," reported Communications Officer Jake Peterson, "we are receiving a transmission from the Vorthon command ship. War Master Gextar wants to speak with you personally." Lisa nodded. "Put him through." The image of War Master Gextar appeared on the main screen. He was tall and thin like all Vorthons, with gray skin and completely black eyes. His uniform was covered with medals and decorations showing his many victories. "Human Commander," Gextar said in a voice like cold metal, "I am War Master Gextar, Supreme Commander of the Vorthon Imperial Fleet. You are facing the largest military force ever assembled by my empire. Surrender now, and I will allow your ships to leave unharmed." 6 months after the great battle at Zelani Prime, Ambassador Paul Carter stood once again in the Galactic Council chamber, but everything had changed since his last visit. The huge room that had once echoed with fear and excuses now buzzed with energy and hope. The most surprising change was in the seating arrangement. Where once there had been empty chairs and species that refused to attend, now every seat was filled. Even more shocking was the presence of Vorthon representatives sitting in a special section that had been built just for them. War Master Gextar himself sat in the front row of the Vorthon delegation. The proud military commander who had once threatened to destroy entire civilizations now wore simple robes instead of his military uniform. His black eyes, which had once shown only cold hatred, now held something that looked almost like respect. Paul walked to the center of the chamber and activated the holographic display system. Images appeared in the air above him, but these were very different from the pictures of destruction that Kethavar had shown months earlier. The new images showed rebuilt cities on Zilani worlds. They showed Vorthon and Zilani children playing together in schools. They showed mixed crews of humans, aliens, and even former Vorthon soldiers working side by side on construction projects. Honored members of the council, Paul began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I am pleased to report that the Vorthon Empire has officially agreed to cease all military expansion activities. They have also agreed to pay reparations to help rebuild the worlds that were damaged during their previous campaigns. He clicked to the next image, which showed a signing ceremony where Vorthon leaders were putting their names on peace treaties. More importantly, Paul continued, the former Vorthon Empire has requested membership in what we are now calling the Mutual Defense Alliance. They want to help protect other species instead of conquering them. A murmur of amazement went through the chamber. Many of the council members had thought this day would never come. The Vorthons had been the galaxy's greatest threat for over a century, and now they were asking to join a peacekeeping organization. Ambassador Kethavar of the Zilani Republic stood up from his seat. The blue-scaled diplomat who had once begged desperately for help now looked healthy and confident. His people were safe and his worlds were rebuilding. The council must understand something very important, Kethavar said, his voice strong and clear. The humans did not just save our worlds from destruction. They showed us who we could be. When they arrived to help us, they did not ask what we could give them in return. They did not demand payment or special trade agreements. They simply asked how they could help. He gestured toward the human delegation, where Paul Carter sat with Admiral Lisa Morgan and Dr. Kate Sullivan. But the humans did something even more important than saving our lives. Kethavar continued. They showed the entire galaxy what it means to stand up for those who cannot defend themselves. They taught us that being strong does not mean conquering others. It means protecting others. Around the galaxy, the changes that Kethavar described were visible everywhere. On the crystal world of Shardhome, Crystarch engineers were working with human technicians to develop new defensive technologies. The living crystal beings had learned from human innovation, while the humans had learned from Crystarch patience and precision. In the gas clouds of Nebula Station, human doctors were working alongside Nebulite healers to develop new medical techniques. Dr. Kate Sullivan had established the Galactic Medical Exchange Program, which brought together healers from dozens of different species. Kate's main hospital was located on New Thessia, the world where the first great battle had been fought. The medical center treated patients from every known species, staffed by volunteers from across the galaxy. The building itself was a symbol of the new cooperation, built with Crystarch crystal walls, Drakmari metal framework, and human architectural design. On a typical day, Kate could be found treating a wounded Vorthon soldier in one room, a sick Zilani child in another, and an injured human marine in a third. Her medical staff included former enemies working side by side to save lives. Dr. Sullivan, said her assistant, a young Vorthon medic named Vexnar, the patient in room 7 is asking for you specifically. He says he owes you his life. Kate looked up from the medical charts she was reviewing. Vexnar had been a soldier in the Vorthon military until 6 months ago. Now he was one of her best medical assistants, dedicated to healing instead of harming. Which patient is that? She asked. The Drakmari warrior who was injured in the mining accident on Kreshtar Prime, Vexnar replied. He says that human medicine saved him when his own people's healers could not help. Kate smiled. Tell him I will be there in a few minutes. And Vexnar, thank you for all your hard work. You have become an excellent healer. The former Vorthon soldier looked pleased. Thank you, Doctor. My people spent so many years learning how to destroy life. It feels good to learn how to save it instead. Similar scenes were happening throughout the galaxy. The Drakmari hegemony had begun incorporating human tactical flexibility into their own military doctrine. Instead of relying only on brute force, Drakmari warriors were learning to think creatively and work as teams. War leader Kraxoth, who had once refused to help the Zilani, now commanded mixed units of Drakmari and human soldiers. His troops were stationed on the border worlds, protecting peaceful species from pirates and raiders. Human fighting methods are strange, Kraxoth admitted to his second-in-command during a training exercise. They do not rely on individual strength or superior weapons. They rely on working together and never giving up. It is more effective than I thought possible. His second-in-command, a Drakmari warrior named Thessia, nodded in agreement. The humans have taught us that there is honor in protecting the weak, not just in defeating the strong. Our ancestors would not have understood this, but I think they would have approved. The most dramatic changes were happening in former Vorthon space. The gray, lifeless worlds that had once been symbols of conquest were slowly coming back to life. Vorthon engineers, working with specialists from other species, were restoring the natural environments of planets they had once destroyed. On the world of Kalarvan, which had been one of the first planets conquered by the Vorthons, green plants were growing again for the first time in 50 years. Vorthon civilians and refugees from the species they had displaced were working together to replant forests and restore rivers. Former War Master Kextar had given up his military rank and taken the title of Restoration Coordinator. He spent his days overseeing the rebuilding projects, trying to undo some of the damage his forces had caused. "I do not expect forgiveness," Kextar said during a speech to mixed crowds of Vorthons and other species. "My people and I caused terrible suffering throughout the galaxy. But the humans have shown us that it is possible to change. They have shown us that strength can be used to protect instead of destroy." He paused, looking out at the audience that included many people whose worlds his armies had attacked. "We cannot change the past," he continued, "but we can build a better future. The humans did not defeat us with superior weapons or larger fleets. They defeated us by showing us a better way to live." On Earth, President Helen Murphy was meeting with representatives from 50 different worlds. The small blue planet that had once been isolated at the edge of the galaxy was now the unofficial capital of the largest alliance in galactic history. The galaxy asked who would stand up for those who could not defend themselves. President Murphy said to the assembled diplomats, "Humanity answered that call. But we did not answer alone. We answered together, as a united galaxy." The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from the border regions. A distress signal had been received from a remote system where unknown raiders were attacking peaceful settlements. Within minutes, ships from a dozen different species were preparing to respond to the emergency. The response fleet included human vessels, Drakmari warships, Crystarch defenders, and even several former Vorthon ships that had been converted for peacekeeping duties. Admiral Lisa Morgan, now the commander of the combined mutual defense fleet, stood on the bridge of her flagship as the mixed armada prepared to depart. Around her, officers from many different species worked at their stations with the efficiency that came from months of training together. "All ships report ready for hyperspace jump," announced her communications officer, who was a young Zelani named Velthara. "Excellent," Lisa replied. "All ships jump to the rescue coordinates. Remember, we do not know what we will find when we arrive, but we know why we are going." Someone called for help and we answer. The fleet disappeared into hyperspace, racing toward unknown dangers to help people they had never met before. This had become routine across the galaxy. Whenever a distress call was received, ships from the Alliance responded immediately. The phrase that Captain Steve Harrison had spoken during the first battle at New Thessia had become the unofficial motto of the new Alliance. They called for help. We answer. Together. Years later, historians would mark the Battle of New Thessia as the turning point in galactic civilization.